Hi, everyone. I guess that most of us probably would say that voodoo and Judaism are generally not two things we think go hand in hand. But in some way, they are. And actually, this week's parasha, Acharei Kedoshim, at least the first part of it, kind of underlines that. What we read about in the parasha, in chapter 16 of Leviticus, is the ritual of Yom Kippur. And indeed, we'll read the parasha once more on Yom Kippur. And what it describes, of course, is the ritual of two goats being brought to Aaron, one of which is sacrificed for God, and the other of which Aaron takes all of the people's sins and all of their confessions, puts it on the head of the goat, sends it off into the wilderness for something or someone called Azazel, one of the mysteries, especially in Leviticus. And most of us, whether on Yom Kippur or during the weekly cycle of Torah readings when we get to Acharei, probably brush over this without thinking too much about it. After all, it's not that different from a lot of things we already do. On our own version of the high holidays, although different from that in the Torah, we do tashlich, which is a ritual not so different from that of the goat. We take pieces of bread or seeds or whatever it might be, and we put our misgivings about the past year onto them and cast them away. We watch them float away in the water so that we can experience that notion of being forgiven, of being cleansed. That's what happens in Leviticus. And actually, that's what happens in voodoo, too. The theory behind something like voodoo is what scholars would call sympathetic magic, that you can do something externally, not because you think it's actually going to make a change per se, but because it helps engender a difference because of the correspondence between one thing and another. So the goat corresponds to the people's transgressions. And by sending it away, it affects and externalizes the feeling, the internal perception that they're forgiven. This is actually a really productive part of religion, and actually it's one that's all throughout Judaism as well. We do lots of things which have a magical basis which we don't realize. Blowing the shofar on Rosh Hashanah is meant to scare away demons and evil spirits who might be lurking there, waiting to report on our bad deeds. So too, smashing the glass at a wedding, the loud noises evidently are abhorrent to evil spirits. And even many of the things that we do around birth and death, tying red strings around cradles, or covering mirrors in the house of a mourner, they're all things which help us to externalize an emotion, and as a result fall roughly into that category of sympathetic magic. We do something on the outside with the intention of it causing a change on the inside. It's actually a really productive thing, and it gets a bad rap these days as superstition, as backwards thinking foolishness. But there's something really powerful about being able to externalize our fears and our hopes and be able to see them. Because once it's outside of us, we can understand it better and we get the distance necessary to analyze it. That said, it tends to lead and tends to slide towards less helpful forms of thinking, particularly really simple magical thinking, right? Where if you did tashlich, but you thought that by putting your sins on the bread and casting it away, you actually did enough to be forgiven, you'd be wrong. The point of tashlich isn't that the bread is magic and that by throwing it away, you're magically forgiven. It's that it helps you to see what it is that you want to do. It helps you to visualize and to externalize and to sympathize with the internal emotional state that you're trying to aim for. So we have to be careful. We have to be careful both not to throw away these practices, which can actually be very helpful to us, rituals which can help frame our lives, but we also have to be careful to recognize what they really are. The ritual, the magic, it in itself isn't the goal. It's the thing that helps us to reach the real goal, which is our own development, our own understanding, our internal processes, which are so much less transparent. So this week, when we read Acharei, and when we think about this strange ritual involving the two goats, one sent to Azazel, we should contemplate what ways that kind of thinking can actually serve us in our own lives very well. How magical thinking, sympathetic magic, even potentially something akin to voodoo dolls, might actually be a really useful part of our own Jewish life, as long as we keep it within the proper bounds. Shabbat shalom.